My fellow Americans,
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie, it may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organization should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossiers. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email, and all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth. And that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've
still
already
in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the major's. The major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me in. He said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores, or we try to cut through the propaganda and navigate this crazy clown world that we are in, and we do it together. So thank you guys for subscribing, liking this show, and being a part of our great community here at Redacted. We have a very busy show for you on this Thursday. We're not shirking our duties. We're going to look at what just unfolded in the European Union and what it means for Americans, because this is coming to America very, very soon, which is the ultimate tracking and surveillance of everything you do using the new digital ID, which the preliminary approval has already gone through. They voted on this yesterday. And now surveillance tracking, this is, vaccine passport. This is biometrics. This is everything being tracked. So government has total control. We'll look more deeply into this.
Across the pond in the United States, the FCC wants total control of the internet. This is net neutrality on steroids, which was already struck down by many courts across the land. Now an FCC commissioner is warning what the FCC is about to do. So when you have someone from the inside saying, my agency is about to get unprecedented power in this federal agency, we better pay attention, and we're going to. Another thing we're going to pay attention to is the FDA approving another drug, which is a weight loss injectable, even though they know it causes cancer in rats. So would you rather deal with your own obesity or maybe risk getting cancer? We're going to look at the clinical trials on that new drug as well.
Well, at least they tested it on a few rats this time. Maybe. We'll see. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. So welcome, everybody, on this Thursday. Good to see all of you. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We don't have all of the answers, but we try to, seek the truth together here on this show. And thank you for being a part of our great community here. Again, if you do subscribe to the channel, it's totally free to subscribe. It's a free show that we put on for you. Your name will pop up here on the big board right behind us. And also on the lower part of the screen, your name will pop up there. And coming up a little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking about this recession that looks like it's unfolding in the first quarter, maybe the second quarter of 2024, and the numbers are getting very bad. In fact, overnight, this happened last night. Look at this. Interest on the U.S. debt skyrockets above $1 trillion for the first time ever. Now, they had been warning about this, that this was going to happen. We've been actually warned about this on the show a few weeks ago, that the U.S. debt was going to exceed the interest payments above $1 trillion for the first time. So what does this mean for an incoming recession, job layoffs, and sort of permanent inflation, maybe hyperinflation? You see a number of governments, of course, swallowing up and buying gold and silver. So we're going to dive more deeply into what this means a little bit later.
I mean, think of us as a productive nation, right? And think of our GDP of about 20 trillion right now. And so a full 1 trillion of that is only on interest payments to our debt. So you have to think about like what us, the working class, could do if we weren't paying off our own nation's debt. What could we accomplish?
Well, and as experts are pointing out, it's vertical. If you saw that chart, I mean, it's literally going up like a cliffside is how this has now popped up here. So this is not just an incremental increase in the amount of interest we're paying on the debt. It's straight up. It's like, like Yosemite National Park or something like that, straight up in the sky.
I've been thinking about this a lot.
It almost feels...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say really quick, it almost feels intentional because they're trying to promote this digital currency. So it's like, hey, you know what we could do to get that digital currency out here? Let's just kill the dollar.
Well, and that's what we've been talking about here on the show. It's the intentional devaluing of the U.S. dollar, right? I mean, and you think you couldn't do that. Why would you want to do that? Well, you do that because the interest payments are so large that when you devalue the dollar, then the interest payments aren't so severe. And so what other choice does the Fed have right now but to devalue the U.S. dollar? So this is it's a great point, and it's a sad point. But of course, this is where we're at right now because they kept interest rates at 2% for like 10 years for so stinking long, artificially keeping the housing market booming and all of these other things. So
something I've been thinking about as I was researching the story about the FDA and this drug about weight loss is the fact that Americans continue to be sold this idea of pharmacracy that like the things that happen to our body are outside of our control, right? Obesity, mental health, that kind of thing, continues to sell power and give power into these federal regulators who then approve these drugs. and they're making money and grabbing power while we are continuously convinced that we're sick. And so years ago, when Paul Ryan's major platform was that we can't afford as a society Medicare and Medicaid, he was working against a system that was selling us the fact that we needed this. So there was never going to be any balancing of the budget, even with I thought Paul Ryan was a pretty well-intentioned politician. He really cared about balancing the budget, but you can't work against these social programs when they're being sold to us as something we need so much. And so when we look at this data on what the FDA is doing to sell you a drug saying your obesity is way out of your control, it's a disease, you can't handle it, but guess what, we have something to sell you, and the FDA will just let them sell it knowing that it causes cancer. This is what we're up against. This is why we can't balance budgets, is because we continue to take this power and money into these federal programs, into the private sector.
That's right. So we're going to get to that story in just a moment. But first, we do have a newsletter. We do have a daily newsletter. We'd love for you to subscribe to it. If you go to redacted.inc, that's the place to go, redacted.inc, and put in your email address, and then you will receive the welcome email, and it'll come from my email, which is Clayton@redacted.inc. It might go to your spam folder. It might go to another one of your spots. It might go to your dangerous folder or something like that. Just drag it over to your VIP list, and you'll be good to go. And then we publish the newsletter Monday through Thursday. Again, it's totally free, but it's our way to stay connected with you because, YouTube has shut us down before multiple times, where then everyone's like, well, where's the show? And we can't even post a community post. We can't post anything. We can't even pin a comment. We can't post anything. So one way for us to stay connected to you is through our newsletter to let you know what's going on in the world where we publish. So go to redacted.inc and sign up for that free newsletter today. All right. Well, I have 3 words for you. Do not comply. In fact, I think we should put them on a Redacted t-shirt. Do not comply. Do not comply with this next tyrannical government move, which just rolled out in Europe. We have unbelievable news over the past 24 hours out of Europe that the mainstream media, of course, is totally ignoring the story, which is, I'm sure, a surprise to you. Go to Bloomberg, go to the Financial Times, go to the Wall Street Journal, you won't find the story, which is, to me, unbelievable. Like, aren't they supposed to be covering the financial world? And this is at the heart of it, and they're totally ignoring the story. It could have massive implications for you and your family. Yes, this is about Europe, but it's coming to the United States as we speak because the Federal Reserve is actively working on the very same thing, and the Biden administration wants it. So if you think you're in America and you're safe from this, you're not. This has broad implications, and you should see Europe, frankly, as a cautionary tale because we are watching the EU collapsing in real time. And today we got our clearest sign yet. The European Parliament voted to roll out the digital identification program. Now, the European Parliament and member states just reached an agreement on introducing the digital identity, the EID, which includes a digital wallet. Unless it gets miraculously voted down, which is highly unlikely, unless you somehow, guys, rise up and take action. If you're anybody watching in Europe right now wants to, write to your members of parliament and let them know that you do not stand for this. But most people will wait until the pain is too great and it's already passed to do anything about it. That's usually what happens. And this will pass, and it will soon take over everyone's lives in the European Union. Now, you have to understand, they are wrapping this in like a burrito of convenience. That your life will be dramatically improved because your digital passport will keep everything nice and neat for you, tidy in one digital ID, right? It sounds great. And that's how they'll sell it to you. Your central bank digital currency, your biometric data, your medical records, all of your personal information, your whereabouts, your movement through GPS, all of it being tracked instantaneously and verified by the government. Of course, most troubling is the central bank digital currency, and that's the big piece of this, the digital euro. Rob Roos, of course, member of the European Parliament, is standing strong against this. He just left the meeting, and he posted this video on social media to warn all of us about what comes next. Watch.
I just left the room where we had the negotiations about the digital identity, and I have bad news. The member states and the European Parliament came to an agreement. It means that probably not far from now, the digital identity will be effect in the European Union. Right after this agreement, Commissioner Breton said, now we have the digital identity wallet, we have to put something in it. And what he meant was the digital euro, also known as the central bank digital currency. And this is a very bad development. They always promise us not to make this connection. And even a lot of experts, privacy experts and security experts, warned also last week this is a very bad idea for our privacy and our freedom. And still, this digital identity is pushed through. But it's not too late, because we still have to vote on this in the plenary. So what you can do, send your MEP from your member state an email and tell him or tell her that you are against this tool.
So that's what we can do, or wait until the pain is there. And that's usually what people do. After it's already passed and it's put into law, then people will rise up and complain about it. And then it's too late. So now, if you happen to be in Europe, you can absolutely do something about this. And again, you can also take action now in the United States and let your member of Congress know that you absolutely do not want a digital ID backed with a central bank digital currency. They're moving towards it. And they're taking away cash and getting rid of ATM machines. I just want to highlight something, though, that he said about Thierry Breton, who said that we now have a digital wallet, so we have to put something in it. Right? That was the message coming out of this. And he said absolutely not. And what he means, of course, is the central bank digital currency. We've been warning against this for more than a year now on this show, and it is happening. As Catherine Austin Fitts just said, this is all about controlling everything you do. Make no mistake. Listen.
Where is this leading? When you have a 100%, what they're shooting for is an all digital system. And if you have a 100% digital system, that can be controlled centrally. And not only can your money be limited to different, geographical areas or spatial areas, but it can also be limited to, sort of what you can buy, when you can buy it. And it can literally tax you without your permission. You can install a system of taxation without representation. But ultimately, Polly, you can implement complete control, because let's say I want to mandate a vaccine. You can't, your financial transaction ability can be turned off. Your access to your financial assets can be denied or stopped if you don't do what you're told.
Just like we've seen with COVID, the government will have the power to track your every move, and they won't have to hide it, by the way, because you've complied with it. Right, you went along with it. You don't have to do this. You can choose not to do this.
And as we've pointed out before, it's going to be an easy sell, because they're going to, first of all, the dollar's getting ready to crash with what you just covered at the beginning of the show. But also they're talking about welfare and food stamps and all the other stuff going through that. And maybe even some kind of, UBI. So people are going to buy into this very easily, and I think it's going to be an easy sell here. And then those of us that are saying, no, don't get it, we're going to be the conspiracy theorists that are trying to spread disinformation.
Didn't we in the newsletter this morning talk about the interest on the debt would exceed $50 trillion?
The full debt.
The full debt by the year 2033, I think is the projection. We're at, 11 or
30?
We're at, excuse me. We're at 30 trillion right now. It'll be 50 trillion. In just a few years. So I think you're right about this, by the year 2033. By this universal basic income saying, hey, sign up for this digital wallet. And by the way, every month we'll give you $1,000 as part of this digital wallet experience. It'll be like a universal basic income, like a welfare.
In fact, we signed a contract today with a vendor that we're working with, and it's in the European Union, says that none of this transaction shall take place in cash, according with law number 567, whatever, right? And so already a lot of business contracts over a certain amount they're disallowed from doing any transactions in cash for the purpose of specifically tracking and taxing.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because even beyond this beyond the privacy is your personal civil liberties and the health. If you want to push a vaccine on this and they tie your ability to make or spend money, you'll have no choice but to either get the vaccine or we turn off your money supply. You'll not be able to go through a toll booth. You'll not be able to get on an airplane. You'll not be able to enter this building. You'll not be able to get on the subway because when you scan your digital ID, oh, you didn't get your vaccine, so we can't let you on the subway. Your digital ID will alert the subway operators, not let you enter. He's not vaccinated. The European Union is quickly digging its own grave, and as Natalie just pointed out, it's already made it illegal for you to use more than $1,000 in cash to pay for anything. You can't pay cash for anything beyond $1,000. And of course, as Christine Lagarde has said, she wanted to get it down to as low as I think $300 in euros. Now, this is an amazing interaction because Christine Lagarde from the European Central Bank thought she was on the phone with a real person. Turns out this was a prank phone call when they got her to admit the truth about EU and cash and how you're not going to be able to use this cash any longer. And if you do use cash, you'll be basically labeled as a terrorist. Watch.
There are many protests in Europe against the electronic euro. What is the reason?
You know, it's the beauty of Europe. It has different positions. If you ask in Northern Europe, for instance, in the Netherlands, they're quite happy to see the e-euro coming. If you ask a young German man, he'll say, yeah, fine. As I said, I don't want Meta, Google, or Amazon to suddenly come up with a currency that would take over the sovereignty of Europe. I don't want a foreign currency to become the currency of trading within Europe. So we have to be ready.
No, the problem is they don't want to be controlled. They don't want to.
Yeah, but you know what? Now we have in Europe this threshold above 1,000 euros. You cannot pay cash. If you do, you are on the grey market. So you take your risk. You get caught, you are fined, or you go in jail. But you know the digital euro is going to have a limited amount of control. There will be control. You're right. You're completely right. We are considering whether for very small amounts, you know, anything that is around 300, 400 euros, we could have a mechanism where there is zero control. But that could be dangerous. The terrorist attacks on France back 10 years ago were entirely financed by those very small anonymous credit cards that you can recharge in total anonymity.
Ah, so it's terrorism. I mean, just imagine. Just think about the balls on her to do that. You're on the gray market. You're a terrorist essentially. You're going to be on a terrorist watch list if you pay $1,000 in cash. And we really want to get it down to 300 because, you know, you're a terrorist
or a plumber
or a gardener.
Or a hairdresser,
or a babysitter, or someone who's made tips, you know, or
Did that prank caller convince her he was Zelensky? Because that's who that sounded like.
I think, yeah. If memory serves, I think she thought she was talking to Zelensky. I think that's who it was. Yes, Christine, I understand. That's very good. Yes, terrorists, stop those terrorists with your $1,000 threshold. I mean, it's amazing. And people are allowing, she's like, oh yeah, Germans would be fine with this. Germans would be fine. People in the Netherlands would be fine with this. How many people watching from the Netherlands right now? Let us know in the chat below. Are you fine with this? Are you watching from Germany? Are you fine with this? Just allowing.
You think Germany would remember what happens when their government has total control? You think, something would spark up there.
Of course, you have to remember that those individuals were voted in and they were voted for and they won an election. So we always need to remember that. But people, you know, it's sort of like a Trojan horse. People don't remember how big this actually gets. You vote certain people in, you think their policies are good or whatever, and then suddenly, wow, look what happened here. And this is like an unelected, basically, group of European parliamentary leaders who are, you know, superseding your statehood. So it doesn't matter what you think in Germany or the Netherlands. It matters what the European Union thinks.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the Nazis didn't run on a campaign of Holocaust.
Right.
Like, this is what we're going to do, right? They made big promises a lot like this.
So I want you to listen to this. This is Augustin Karsten. He explains how these CBDCs will control everything you do. And this is a 56-second video. He's from the Bank of International Settlements. Okay, he's not on your side. He's not on your side, but he's explaining how exactly this is going to be implemented and rolled out. It's terrifying. Watch.
All our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
Yeah. Great. So Europe, you have a chance. You have a choice right now, as Rob Roos just said. Like, you can call or email your member of parliament say you do not want this digital ID system, which is tied, which will be tied to the central bank digital currency, or you can allow it to roll out. Go ahead, David.
There might be a positive to this, because if they're trying to get it so that this stops the funding of war and terrorists, maybe that means they're going to let us have 51% of our money back, our taxes, because we're funding the United States empire. So maybe like, well, no more funding war. Yeah. Hey, you get 51% of your tax money back.
I would sign up for it if the $1 trillion per year defense budget was eradicated and it went back to the citizens. Like, they're like, hey, every month we're going to be able to provide you with this, and it'll fix roads and bridges and schools, and we'll make sure that everything, your police departments are sound and your border is secure. Take that $1 trillion. No homeless, yeah. Well, no tent cities on the side of the road. No fentanyl crisis. We'll secure the borders. We'll do all of the. No, they're not going to do that. They'll just keep printing money, and they'll throw it into a digital account, and it's all fake, phony money anyway. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you live in Europe? Are you worried about it coming to the United States? Because it is. And let us know in the comments below. We've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're going to look at the control of the internet, what the FCC, the power that the Federal Communications Commission is giving to the Biden administration. Let me ask you this. Do you want the Biden administration to control the internet? See, they seem like good people. You want Kamala Harris kind of in charge of your internet? What about Rachel Levine?
I'll just give you a little hint on what they want to do, since they're trying so hard to censor you. And the Supreme Court now is going to decide whether or not they can. Hopefully they decide that they can't. But in the meantime, they say, well, if we lose this one, maybe we can control the speed and punish the ISPs, the internet service providers, if they're seeing things we don't want them to see. So let's take the power of the gas pedal and the brakes, because we cannot right now control the content. It's two different ways to the same outcome. So it's pretty crazy. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're going to talk about the FDA approving a new injectable drug for obesity and more. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Trust and Will, because estate planning can be fun, you guys. Of course, we want to enjoy our lives, but we want to make sure that our family's taken care of when we are no longer around. And it's just prudent to make sure that you have a plan for your family. If you don't, then when you pass, their lives become a lot harder, not easier. And you want to, of course, leave a legacy for them. But of course, traditional estate planning can cost thousands of dollars, and a one-size-fits-all template may not capture all the important details of the life that you've built. But with Trust and Will, you can protect your legacy from the comfort of your home, starting at just $159. So create your estate plan in minutes with Trust and Will. From maintaining control of your assets to easing the burden on your loved ones, an estate plan can ensure your family stays prepared and protected. It also just gives you peace of mind, because how many times have you just been thinking about your own I know we all think about our own mortality and just think, what would happen to me? Would that be okay? This is something, obviously you want to think that my family would be in a better off position because I lived my life. So help loved ones avoid lengthy and expensive legal proceedings or having the state decide what happens to your asset. Ever heard of probate? That's something you do not want. There's a reason it sounds like prostates not something that you want to deal with. So Trust and Will secures your information with bank-level encryption. You get live customer support through phone, chat, and email. So right now, gain peace of mind with Trust and Will and get 10% off plus free shipping of your estate plan documents by visiting trustandwill.com/redacted. That's 10% off a rock-solid estate plan plus free shipping at trustandwill.com/redacted.
You know, we love real estate and we would see in probate stuff all the time. Like, this house is in probate. You know what that means? It means that the family didn't have a will and they didn't plan.
And it goes into,
and then it goes into probate court.
Yeah.
And then a judge decides who gets the house. Like, do you want a judge deciding like which member of a family or extended family or the city or the state gets the property? Like, you literally, if you could avoid having a court deal with it if you just had a piece of paper and a will put in place.
Yeah, and the
trust.
most heartbreaking part of that, because my mother was a title and escrow officer, is that a lot of times when assets end up in probate, this is what tears families apart. So you think about your children can destroy their relationship by fighting over assets when they don't have a real plan. If you have a plan and you leave that in place, it's just so much less likely that your family is torn apart over money. And that's a terrible story, but my mom dealt with that all the time in her career.
Yeah, it's not just a one-off thing. It's
Yeah.
not cautionary tale. If you do subscribe to the show, your name will pop up here on the big screen. We just saw a bunch of people subscribe, so thank you very much for that. Again, during the show, you'll see your name pop up if it's live. And yeah, there you go. And you'll see it pop up there, right there, on the big screen and below. So just go to subscribe on Rumble or YouTube.
While you still can, because right now the Biden administration is trying to gain more power over what you see on the internet. This is an egregious power grab, and we're going to tell you about someone from inside the FCC warning us about it, because the question is, who will control the internet? If the Biden administration has its way, the government will. We see them just trying to wrestle that power into their own arms every damn day. FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr issued a dire warning that the Biden administration is about to hand the FCC unprecedented power. This is one of the heads of the FCC warning about the power his own commission is about to receive. We should pay attention to this. If this is someone who's in this commission saying, hey, anyone else think we shouldn't have this power here? He's the lone man in
Everyone
the room.
loves power. Everyone loves power. So when someone is saying, wait a second, this is too much power, we should pay attention. That's like George Washington saying, hey, would you like to be, elected in perpetuity?
Yeah.
He's like, no. Two terms, I'm done. I need to cede power to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kudos for somebody actually standing up to power in a position that they were put in. Like, they're doing their job.
And they're risking their job, by the way.
And it's like at the end of Batman when they destroy that power to see the whole city.
Right.
And and he's like, we shouldn't have this.
The Dark Knight.
This is not very good.
Right.
Yes, The Dark Knight. Okay, so let's take a look at the letter that he posted just a few days ago. What this is about is that the FCC is about to vote on President Biden's plan to give the administration state effective control of all internet services and infrastructure. Carr published this warning saying the plan is equivalent to Soviet-era planning and control. Say no more, right? Because Soviet-era plan and control was concentration in the hands of a few. That's the reason that was a large reason behind infrastructure collapse in the Soviet Union, why we no longer have it. We spoke about this when the rules were announced a few weeks ago. It amounts to a power grab for net neutrality long after net neutrality has long since been defeated. Now, net neutrality is the notion that the FCC can create laws to prevent internet service providers, I'm going to call them ISPs from now on, from prioritizing, slowing down, or blocking content online. This was hotly debated during the Obama years, and it was struck down when the Trump administration took office. California tried to put it back in place, and it was struck down again in the courts. Now, net neutrality is kind of a double negative when we're talking about it, because it prevents ISPs and mobile companies from changing the speed that they deliver data or prioritizing some data based on whether or not they make money from those content or sites. Instead, with net neutrality, it's the FCC deciding what's fair, not capitalism. So I know I'm talking in a lot of double negatives, and I feel like these nomenclatures are written to confuse us, so we don't know who has power and who doesn't. So right now, as it stands, this power is not in the federal government. It rests in the hands of capitalistic terms the internet service providers decide. Now, when this was struck down, Democrats cried bloody murder that this would ruin the internet once and for all. Here, this one makes me laugh because it just does not age well. Here is NBC saying that when we don't have net neutrality, it will marginalize LGBTQ plus people because their corner of the internet will be slowed. Take a look at this warning from years and years ago saying, oh, LGBTQ people are going to be in big trouble when the federal government does not regulate the internet. Boy, did they have that backwards, because since the end of net neutrality,
the opposite.
The internet is more LGBTQ. It certainly is not less. I don't know what internet, they were worried about. Most of the opposition was about what you would or wouldn't see on the internet. Like you wouldn't see free speech. You won't see marginalized people. Well, now, Democrats are completely on the other side of that. And they're worried about what you can see. So the argument has changed, right? On the left, they're like, oh no, we won't see these marginalized, people, and we need full transparency of the internet. Now they're like, oh no, you're seeing things that's, anti-COVID or whatever. You can't see that. So we're worried about what you do see. Now here is Bernie Sanders warning about net neutrality again back during the Obama years. Watch.
A disastrous decision. It will impact every American. It will give huge advantages to big corporations over small businesses, to big media companies over smaller media outlets. We've got to do everything we can to defeat this thing in the courts and defeat it legislatively.
Well, he was wrong. It was not the end of the internet. The internet persisted with these freedoms, and the rules of capitalism has mostly been working. I'll put an asterisk there, and then you can ask me about it later if you want me to expand. So back then, now back to September of this year, the FCC released this plan. They say that the FCC is going to be given additional authority to safeguard national security, advance public safety, protect consumers, and facilitate broadband deployment. Now, this is very broad, don't you think? Whereas before it was like, we want to make sure that you get everything on the internet. Now the language is, we want to make sure you're not getting a lot of stuff on the internet. Do you see how this argument has flipped, but it's still the same control mechanism? And also, when you're talking about, more powers to a federal agency, and they're not a judicial branch, I'm out. That's why Commissioner Carr left us this warning just a few days ago. Look what he says. He says last month, the FCC gave these marching orders. The president called on the FCC to implement this long thing that we just showed you. What he says here is, for the first time ever, those rules would give the federal government a roving mandate to micromanage nearly every aspect of how the internet functions, from how ISPs allocate capital and where they build, to the services that consumers can purchase. So services, like, are we talking about shows? Like maybe you want to watch a news program like this. Would you be allowed? From the profits that the ISPs can realize and how they market and advertise services, to the discounts and promotions that customers can receive. Talk about central planning. So it's like everything about the internet, right, will be regulatable. He says that the Biden administration is blaming the private sector for the current digital problems, and he explains how this will give the government almost mafia-style control. He says it gets worse. The FCC reserves the right to regulate both actions and omissions. In other words, if a company takes actions, they're liable. They'll get in trouble. If they do nothing, they'll be liable. They'll get in trouble. This is where he says this is like Soviet studies, right? He says the plan sweeps entire industries within the FCC's jurisdiction for the first time in its 90-year history. Look down the bottom. You can read this for yourself later. But what he says is Congress never authorized the FCC to regulate these industries or entities. So to all businesses and individuals that will be subject to this for the first time, I hope you guys have good lawyers. I think what he's meaning, and what we're going to talk about later, is this has to be contested in court. It just has to, because this is the government taking away capitalistic freedoms from these companies. The way that it was shut down during the Obama years was in the courts, was when AT&T, Google, Comcast, they fought it, and they will have to do that again. Undoubtedly they will, or else they'll just be regulated out of existence. And then the internet will literally become state-run. That's terrifying. That's Hunger Games level. Like, you cannot, the internet will belong to the government. Can you imagine?
No, this
I
is
won't be able to sit
game-changer.
here like this.
No, this is
No
unbelievable.
way.
This will change the internet forever.
Yes.
Make no mistake about it. Again, I kind of come back to the story we did earlier about the, digital identification. You have a choice right now to speak out against this, because this is coming. You saw when people rose up against net neutrality, they rose up and spoke out. All of these websites shut down, went black. They they shut down their websites. Wikipedia, remember Wikipedia? I think went black. Everyone's like, no, we're not going to allow this to happen.
Right.
And the internet rose up and said, no, this can't happen. Now there's like silence on this. They're fine. The left is like fine with what the Biden administration is doing here.
Yeah, it's crazy. He said that even though they've been discussing these type of plans for 2 years, take a look here. He says there's little or no evidence that it even needs to happen. They're not proving that there's already a problem. They're just saying they want this. He says even in the absence of any evidence of intentional discrimination, the Biden plan states that the FCC can impose potentially unbounded liability if the agency finds that some act or failure to act happened to result in a disparate impact based on the FCC's own judgment. That makes them the law enforcer, the judge, all of that, right? So you can imagine, so let's just play this out for a second. You have, let's say, AT&T for your home internet, and it's delivering you a show like this, and they decide that they don't like what we do because they may, accuse us of a misinformation, and then they can get fined, right? And they will be liable for all the content on their air. And then what happens? Then they can fine the ISP. The ISP will just say, well, we're not going to carry content like this. It's too risky. And so what will you get is basically what we think of as North Korea, right? The news that they get. I've never been to North Korea. I don't know how that really works. It's a trope.
This show, we have shown people that with the digital currency, they will be controlling what we spend, where we can go, what we can do. And now this is going to set the bar for them, controlling what we see, what we read, what we hear. I mean, this is the formation of total control. This is literally like a dictatorship is forming in front of our eyes.
Right. Now, what can we as citizens do about it? Nothing, because the FCC will vote on its own powers. So how do you think that's going to go? Hey, everybody here, do you want to expand the role of the agency and our powers? Yeah, we all do. Okay, good. So this vote's not up to us, and it's also not up to our elected officials. So we can't really call anybody and say, vote this down, unless you know someone who works at the FCC, or you can support this guy, Brendan Carr. I suppose you can tell your elected official that you would like to strip powers from the FCC. I don't know how far that will get you, but it's worth a call. But even if this passes the vote, Commissioner Carr had said, I hope they have good lawyers. There is reason to believe this will go to the Supreme Court. We showed you this argument from Reason.com, an outlet that I like quite a bit. They said that this power grab won't stand up to legal scrutiny thanks to this Supreme Court decision from 2021, where the court relied on the so-called major questions doctrine to make it more difficult for agencies to expand their power. And that went in the way of less power for a federal agency. So probably that would apply to net neutrality, but we don't know. And who would challenge this? The ISPs and tech companies, just like they did during the Obama years. So again, in this case, our elected officials cannot save us from this egregious power grab. It would have to be the private sector to do so, and if they even have the guts, because so many of them have acted like Theon Greyjoy from Game of Thrones. The government's been basically beating and humiliating them through censorship. You think of Google, right? Okay, censor this, Twitter, Facebook, they've been doing exactly as they're told, like good lapdogs. And so are they going to then have the guts to lawyer up and protect basically their right to exist? Because if they don't, they will be punished and fined. They'll be even more Theon Greyjoyed, excuse the Game of Thrones reference, than they already were. So it's going to get hot in here, up in this internet, folks.
This is terrifying.
I just want to point out, too, that today I am wearing my Game of Thrones t-shirt.
Oh,
so
you came in costume.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Very good.
Ready.
Smart move. Yeah, let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you want the Biden administration controlling your internet speeds and allowing you to see what they want you to see, at which speed they want you to see? Oh, you want to jump on YouTube and watch Redacted? Sorry. Internet speeds are throttled because they don't like what we're saying here on this show.
Yes.
That's exactly what's saying. Oh, you want to go to like InfoWars? You want to read that website? Sorry. Very difficult to load those pictures and videos because the Biden administration doesn't want you to see that.
Right. And that sounds speculative, but they did it to Twitter accounts they don't like by asking Twitter to downrank and hide those. So why wouldn't they do that for the actual...
It's not a conspiracy theory.
No,
these
for
are the
actual
same people.
pressure of the valve. Yeah.
These are the same people that use the IRS to go after political opponents. I mean, you think this is a conspiracy theory? It's not. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
I was just going to say, look at what Canada's doing with the fining of journalists for spreading misinformation or disinformation. Like, you know, like they're coming for this type of content.
Yeah, yeah. It's terrifying. It really is. And journalists are being fined in other countries as well. So it's a brave new world, sadly. It's very Orwellian. It really is. Really, really terrible. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. We've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're going to look at the FDA and the new fat drugs. And, well, hey, you know, they cause cancer, but that's okay. We'll talk about it.
In rats. You're not a rat.
Yeah, you're a human. So it's not, don't even worry about it. We'll talk about that. We're also going to look at the recession. A number of experts pointing to a recession in 2024, the beginning of the year, just after Christmas. What does that mean? We're already starting to see a big slowdown in freight traffic. That means consumer spending, consumer confidence is dropping. A number of cities now dropping home prices. So what are we in for? We're going to look at that, as well as the amount of debt and interest payments. But first, we want to tell you about our new friends over at Aris Tech. Yes, our friends at Aris Tech have got something really, really special, because if you're on the Rumble community, did you know that the device you're streaming on right now is emitting dangerous electromagnetic radiation? I know, it's shocking. It is. Our cell phones, our laptops, our tablets, and headphones are all sources of harmful EMFs. France even recently banned the sale of Apple's iPhone 12 for breaching European radiation exposure limits. Can you believe that? Science has proven how even low levels of radiation have a negative impact on our health, our sleep, and fertility, all serious problems, even neurological decline. As we introduce more and more tech into our lives, this problem only escalates. Now, before you panic and throw away your device, throw it in the toilet or something, meet Aris Tech. Now, the only scientist-trusted EMF protection solution that exists. Aris devices neutralize harmful electromagnetic radiation and effectively counteract any negative impacts on your body. It's a revolutionary method for protection that goes beyond traditional blocking techniques. It's designed for the tech-savvy person in the digital world that we live in today. So right now, enjoy your tech, boost your well-being, but just go to their website and check it out. See the website right here on your screen. It's aristech.com. That's AIRESTECH.com. If you're driving and you don't know how to spell it, AIRES tech.com. Go check out their website. I spent a lot of time on their website. I'm going to order a couple of the device protection cases for the phones in our house and other devices to make sure that we're not getting that extra radiation. We actually, a lot of people write to us on a regular basis and want us to do stories on this particular issue. So thank you for pointing that out to us, dear viewers. So here is a sponsor who supports our show and can also help protect you.
All right. Well, the FDA has approved another injectable drug for weight loss to compete with the popular drug Ozempic. This new drug is called Zepbound. It's kind of that's a fun word to say. It's made by
does
Eli
like a fat
Lilly.
Injection drug have to have a Z in it? Sorry, but does it have to have Ozempic?
Ozempic.
Yeah, it must, because it must. Yeah, you want to zap that fat. You want to zap that fat.
Well, there's another one that
Ozempic.
Competes with Ozempic. What's it called?
Zepbound.
They don't all have a Z.
It's like Zabruder. It's like the Zabruder film.
Mounjaro.
Oh, that's right. So
But Mounjaro is, well, okay. Mounjaro is Zepbound. So maybe they've just given us this because it needed a Z. I don't know. So what we're talking about here is these new injectable drugs where you put a shot in your body once a week. And they're so popular with celebrities. Apparently Kim Kardashian uses it. I don't know that for a fact. My sister told me that. But that's how you get ready for red carpet events, is you take this for a while. It is an appetite suppressor mostly. And so it has been popular with mere mortals too. We went over this in June when the Wall Street Journal told us that Big Pharma was competing like mad because this is so stinking profitable. Take a look at this. Here is a sales forecast for Ozempic. It's supposed to just continue to grow precipitously, mostly in the US. Sales in the 16, 18, 20 billion per year. That's close to 14 billion this year alone. And Ozempic has been approved for children as young as 12. There is no indication when you read the pharmaceutical black labels for this, or the white labels, there's no indication of when you ever get off of this. Once you get on it, you kind of have to stay on it. So what the FDA is saying here is that it's totally okay to start kids at 12 on this lifelong drug because, $14 billion a year is awesome. So let's go over Zepbound because this is the new one that will now be put on the market. So let's start with these two important questions where we always start when the FDA has a new approval. Number one, was it properly trialed? And number two, is it safe? Well, remember this, when we went over the new COVID vaccine just a few weeks ago, I made this handy dandy list of all the priority drug reviews that the FDA has put on the market this year alone. So the RSV vaccines, the two of them were trialed, but both had either priority or fast track. Zurzuvae was the pill for postpartum depression, fast tracked. Both of the new COVID vaccines, fast tracked. So was Zepbound fast tracked? Yes, it was. Here's the FDA's press release for today. It received priority review and fast track designation for this. Now, why?
It's amazing. It's amazing that they didn't use the obesity epidemic as a reason to do emergency use. So I guess we can be glad there.
I mean, but essentially they are. Why would they need to do this fast? Right? Because the obesity epidemic is pretty steady state at about 70% of the population in an overweight pathology right now. So I guess given the fact that so why does this one have to go faster when there already is two on the market? Why would the FDA give this any priority? You have to wonder. What are they doing for us?
Well, because of the profits. They're going to miss out on all the sweet money if they don't get it fast tracked.
Yes,
that's an emergency. Right. I, for one, am concerned for them. Very concerned that they might miss out on some of them billions.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I want to point out, like the FDA. So there used to be a process that was a complete circle that every drug had to go through in order to get approved, right? And then the pharmaceutical companies complained, so they cut that in half. So now it's only half a circle that has to go through, but fast track means they only go through half of the circle in order to get approved. And then emergency use, they don't even have to go through any of the circle. It just gets approved. So that means there's no studies. That means there's very little data. They just want to get it out.
Well, the two clinical trials done on tirzepatide, I'm not sure exactly. I'm going to say it tirzepatide because it's more fun. They were both clinically reviewed, clinical trialed, and they both were peer reviewed. But the clinical trials, as far as I can tell, haven't been fully published. They were done on two groups of obese adults, some with diabetes, some with other weight-related health conditions, and some without, just met the BMI of obesity. And both groups did show weight loss of between 5 and 15% after the trials. But the trials were, again, for tirzepatide, which is the active ingredient in Zepbound. But tirzepatide was already approved in Eli Lilly's Mounjaro. So it's basically a new label on the same drug. Mounjaro is approved for diabetes. Now Zepbound, same ingredient, is approved for obesity. So basically now they have two opportunities to inject this in people, and it's based on the same clinical trials. Okay. Now, the way it works, again, is that it manipulates your hormones to reduce appetite. But is it safe? Well, here is on Zepbound's own white label, and it's on the FDA's announcement of this approval today. It says Zepbound can cause side effects such as nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, constipation, abdominal discomfort and pain, injection site reactions, fatigue, hypersensitivity reactions, typically fever and rash, burping, hair loss, and gastroesophageal reflux disease. Also, it is known to cause thyroid C-cell tumors in rats. It's unknown whether Zepbound causes such tumors, including medullary thyroid cancer in humans. Don't know, but we just thought we'd write it there in case you get it. Also, it shouldn't be used in combination with these other things.
I mean, that sets them up for some amazing marketing, because based on all that, they can say with 100% certainty that you will lose weight. It'll either be with the drug, with the side effects, or with cancer.
Right. Or with all this vomiting and diarrhea, too. That's another way to...
Yeah, that's what I meant, the side effects. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
right.
You're guaranteed to lose weight.
Yeah. So, yeah, possible cancer. So here is the, here's the teeter-totter that you have to consider is, do I want to deal with the obesity right now, or do I want to take this, let that deal with the obesity, and maybe I get cancer later? How would you weigh those out? I'm just curious because, we know that obesity is related already to many types of cancer and other negative health effects. So are you putting yourself at risk of cancer either way here? These are our choices. Now, these side effects are very similar to the side effects of Ozempic. We went over with this recently. Again, you see a lot of the same things: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. People are saying that it also causes really bad cramping. It's messing with your stomach, you guys. Also, if you take this for vanity, you may want to consider that you look old, they say, if you take this because it's dehydrating you, essentially making your face kind of sag, so much so that there's a name for this. Take a look at this article, Ozempic face. Like you just start to look lifeless and like you're draining all life out of your body, like in The Dark Crystal. No, thank you. The rationale for approving this drug, though, is that obesity is related to cardiac disease. So if we lower people's obesity, then we lower their risk of cardiac disease. We may give them cancer in the meantime, but that's what we're, doing. We're giving them this devil you choose situation. And again, there's no indication of how patients can ever get off of these, because presumably once you start, you can't get off. But also... Go ahead.
Well, and I just want to point out, just think, like, there are people in board meetings that are like, that's just a risk we're going to have to take to get these profits, guys. If we don't take those risks, we're not going to make these profits, and we're heading towards bankruptcy because COVID's down. So it's like they're sitting there thinking this in their minds and justifying it and saying that we have to do this. We have to take these risks with cancer and these side effects to pad our pockets.
That's the problem with the for-profit pharmaceutical industry, right? If you know your goal, your goal is not to necessarily do good. Your goal is the bottom line for your shareholders. That's your goal. And how can you fudge data, hide data, keep it hidden, fast track things through emergency use authorization so you can pod those bottom line profits and screw the people's health.
Right, but it's also on us for buying this idea that obesity is a disease that is outside of our control. And the more we promote these narratives, it's not your fault, it's the food industry's fault, it's toxins, it's outside of your control, it's a disorder of your brain, right? Then we're taking control of our health and giving it to somebody else because we can't take it. It's the same thing when we see all of these. That's why now I'm very wary of all of these, like Meghan and Harry want to promote mental health, like good mental health, right? What is that telling people? Is that it's outside of their control. It's not something, it's a disease. You can't help it. But the pharmaceutical companies can, right? The more that we take that power back and say, I am going to fight with the food industry for my own health, and I'm not going to give them the power of pharmacracy, then the less they have the power to sell this to us. But they can do this. Nobody's going to push back because everyone's like, yeah, obesity, it's a disease. Can't help it. Need this drug. Right?
Yeah.
We've agreed on this culturally, unless we don't.
Well,
and I'm putting that out here that maybe we shouldn't.
Well, it's like the processed food industry, right? I mean, it's a circle that they've created. So with the processed food and the highly processed food, that industry, and actually some of them actually share money, right? So they're actually owned by different parent companies that, they make you sick with the processed food, and then they sell you the solution with the medications. And it's something that's a disease, so it's not in your control, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's...
don't get me started on alcoholism as a disease, right?
Yeah, I mean, am I wrong about that? Like, so being fat is a disease now?
This is not the definition of disease. It's
Right.
not a cellular malfunction, right? And so we've expanded this definition of disease and what has it done? It's not made anybody better. It's made us worse because of the biopharmaceutical complex that continues to say, yeah, poor you. Mental health and
I think it's
obesity and alcoholism, it's outside of your control.
It also has a lot to do with the corporate structure, because these companies can actually be fined and whatever for not going after profits. I mean, that is something they have to do. And when it's something like they're providing something that we absolutely need, they're providing our food, they're providing our medicine, but it's like it works against them because we are making them rich by providing things that we need. And so that system is just so flawed, because then they're forced to try to make more money off of us while we're trying to just get the things we need to survive. And it just doesn't balance.
Right. And so we have this expanding conception of the word need, right? We think we need drugs to control our obesity or mental health or alcoholism or things that are not technically a disease. So, I want us all to think about how we use those words really carefully. Even
heart disease. I almost wonder, you think about heart disease. Well, we know what it comes from.
Right. Or, what another one really bothers me when people say like, oh, I have PTSD over that. PTSD was only ever supposed to be for Vietnam vets. And it was just about regret over fighting a useless war. But the drug companies latched onto it and they're like, ooh, this is something, we can sell this. And then this idea of lasting trauma is something that has become pharmacracized and is very profitable for biopharmaceutical companies. And so it's not a word that I like, not a term I like to use anymore, because humans have trauma. That's a natural experience of being a human.
All of humanity, all of human life is suffering, right? That's
right. And so
that's what we're here
this
for.
idea that like, oh, you're traumatized, there's a pill for that, it's outside of your control, I think is extremely dangerous. Okay, let's get back though to these injectables, because I want to tell you that because they still require needles and nobody loves needles, drug makers are racing to make this in pill form. In fact, Pfizer thought they had something on their hand with lotiglipron, but they had to stop it because it was causing elevated liver enzymes in the clinical trials. So now they said they ended those trials, but instead they'll focus on another one because they've got this obesity pill in the works called danuglipron. I didn't say that right.
Why do they name these things like this?
Who the hell cares?
Because they've run out of cool names.
Yeah.
Dan and Niglipron.
I would say, I'm not going to bother to pronounce that. How about that, Pfizer? So this is in phase 2 of clinical trials. But as popular as these drugs are, there is a chance that they won't be on the market for that much longer because they are getting litigated to high hell. Take a look at this. A woman in Louisiana is suing Ozempic maker Novo Nordisk, saying that she developed gastroparesis, a slowdown of the emptying of the stomach into the small intestine that led to vomiting and pain. She says she was not warned about this. The drug maker says, yeah, you were warned about this. We knew this and we told you. Eli Lilly also facing this about Mounjaro, which was just approved in the name of Zepbound. That's what we're talking about right now, but they are facing class action lawsuits about it. So again, take it at your own risk. And I just want to point out that even though I've given you all of these warnings in this report, the mainstream media is not. Take a look at just a small collection of headlines about this approval today. They're calling it highly effective, 20% better, great approval, with no warnings, such as could cause cancer or at least causes cancer in rats. You would think maybe they're paid by Big Pharma for the way they're covering this. A little cynical.
That's a little cynical. This segment brought to you by Pfizer. Anderson Cooper 360 brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah.
All of these segments, all of these news shows are brought to you by the biopharmaceutical industry, of course. And Eli Lilly, we just talked about the other night on the show in relation to the antidepressant story.
Yes.
They were caught hiding data from their trials when they knew the adverse events and side effects from those things. They knew that, and they held it out of trial and kept it behind, and they didn't release it. So
yeah. All right. Well, let us know. Is this something that you think that you would be interested in taking? Would you rather take this injectable or deal with obesity in a different way when you know that this could cause cancer? I know you're not a lab rat, but is that something that you would like to take a risk on? So let us know in the chat.
We've got more news to get to. We're going to talk about the recession in 2024 and what that means for your wallet. How do you protect yourself? And what can we expect actually over the next few months? We're going to go through the data here. It's very, very important that we do. We try to check in on this every few weeks because I watch it very closely every day. And this is something that's going to affect our families. We're talking what happens in Israel, of course, could affect the Straits of Hormuz. It could also affect oil prices and what will energy costs look like this winter as well. So we'll do that. And coming up a little bit later in the show, please subscribe like David just did. Thank you, David. It popped up here on the big board. So please subscribe and your name will pop up here right there.
All right. Well, before we get to that news, I want to tell you about our friends over at BioOptimizers and tell you about Mag Breakthrough. This is not a biopharmaceutical product. This is a natural supplement to help you sleep more. Magnesium is something your body naturally needs to get more rest. But, as humans, we have our screens, we have our worries. A lot of times our minds run and we're not always able to get ourselves to sleep, especially if we take our Nintendo Switch to bed.
Hey.
Clayton. So right now, listen up. BioOptimizer's Black Friday mega sale is happening and will last throughout the entire month of November. Listen carefully, though, because this mega deal is only available for our listeners with our code. Now, we all have those ever-growing Black Friday wish lists, but this year I want you to make your health a top priority, especially your sleep. And instead of those impulse purchases, maybe focus on what really matters, which is your sleep. We're here to tell you that absolutely you can get a restful night of sleep with Magnesium Breakthrough from BioOptimizers. It's a game changer in the quest for a better night's sleep. This is something that, yes, Clayton and we do take regularly, especially when it's one of those nights that your mind starts going. So BioOptimizer's Black Friday mega sale is happening right now and lasting through the entire month of November. And the biggest discount you can get and amazing gifts with purchases are only available on our landing site, which is biooptimizers.com/redacted, and use the code redacted. Again, go to biooptimizers.com/redacted and enter code redacted at checkout. Your well-rested, calmer, and healthier self will thank you. One more time, biooptimizers.com/redacted and use the code redacted.
Well, a number of reports over the past 24 hours pointing to a recession coming in early 2024. Will it be Q1? Will it be the second quarter of 2024? CEO of DoubleLine, Jeffrey Gundlach, just came out and said that he believes a recession is coming by 2024, and he thinks the interest on the debt is a huge reason why. Watch.
The interest expense on the debt is exploding in a vertical fashion because all of those bonds that were issued back at 25 to 50 basis point interest rates, or maybe only as high as 1%, they're all rolling off. And they're rolling off with great speed. Already, the interest expense, since the Fed started raising interest rates, has gone up by hundreds of billions of dollars, almost $500 billion per year. And it's going literally vertical. My belief is that we're going to be in recession. If we're not already in recession, we'll probably be in a recession by the second quarter of 2024.
Another report coming out showing that consumer confidence is plummeting, spending is drying up, and freight recession is also on the horizon. So what is actually happening right now, and how can you protect your family? Every few months, we love to check in with Kevin Demerit. He's the CEO of Lear Capital, a good friend of the show, to see what's going on with this economy and kind of make sense of it all. Kevin, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Clayton.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So we hear this report from Jeffrey Gundlach, and we see a number of indicators over the past few days pointing to an early 2024 recession. I guess we always get that sort of Christmas bump, where there's a little bit of temporary hiring. People are sort of, in that Christmas holiday spirit. And then January and February hits, and we could be in for a crap show. What are you seeing right now, and how can you make sense of this?
Well, we look at a couple of things. You brought up the freight. So when you look at freight, one of the indicators you look at with freight, if you can believe this, is cardboard boxes. If you see a dramatic slowdown in cardboard boxes from manufacturers to people who need to deliver it. So I don't know about anyone who's listening to the podcast, but I seem to have an Amazon box show up almost every single day at my house. If you see cardboard boxes starting to decline, usually it's a decent indicator of where the economy is going. Sounds very simple and basic, but a lot of people use it, and it's extremely accurate. So I think the freight slowdown is one thing. Gundlach is talking about the interest on the debts, going through the roof, not just for the U.S. government, but for consumers as well. So if you look at bankruptcies filed, we are at the same levels of bankruptcies that we were just prior to 2008 from the Great Recession. We are at the same level as in COVID. When you look at personal debt, near record levels, credit card debt, near record levels, actually exceeding record levels, late payments on vehicles climbing to a record level again. These are usually the indicators that say the consumer is tapped out, the free COVID money's at the end, and they're going to slow down their purchases. So what you've seen with a lot of the earnings coming out is that, yes, we may have had a great third quarter. Fourth quarter, we're a little bit concerned because consumer spending is slowing down. They're having to spend more on food. They're having to spend more on interest payments for their mortgages, credit card debt, vehicles, so on and so forth. So I 100% believe that in 2024, we are going to have a recession. I don't know, you must be living under a rock if you don't think we're going to have a recession in 2024. How bad it's going to be is the question.
Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, right, I mean, even if there's not a recession, what harm does it do to protect your family and to make some moves to at least shore up some of this capital to protect yourself in the case we do have layoffs and people are out of jobs or skyrocketing prices? And I think that's a very big concern, especially if freight is, declining. And you're seeing, I'm glad you brought up the cardboard box thing, because I was reading a report on cardboard boxes last week, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is really troubling. Cardboard box demand plunging at rates that we haven't seen since the Great Recession. So that is a true measure of our economy right now. If people are buying things, if people are not shipping things, then jobs will be the inevitable fallout from this. Companies are going to cut the fat, and they're going to lay people off.
Yeah, people think that I believe that, Wall Street has this crystal ball, or those guys have these supercomputers. And, you look at cardboard boxes and you say, hey, look, how does that work? Well, it works pretty good, actually. So, yes, those are the things that you're talking about that usually come after. If you're not selling cars, there's going to be some people laid off, that are selling cars. We're already seeing people being laid off because of AI. People are just becoming much more efficient. Do I need as much from my secretary when I have AI, or do I need the answering service after hours when I can have AI answer it? So you've got a lot of different things converging at the same time. People have less money to spend. Things are becoming a little bit more expensive. The earnings are starting to be pulled back by these companies that are looking at it and saying, hey, the consumer just can't keep spending at this pace. You can't keep spending if your credit card's maxed out. You can only go so far. So I believe that Gundlach is probably right, where, right around the second quarter of 2024, you're going to start to see, the recession. But you're going to see the effects, like you're talking about, right after Christmas, when you usually see that January effect of, okay, things are on sale right after Christmas. Let me hold off a little bit. A lot of people have been doing that and then purchasing in January. I don't think you're going to see that this year. And that will start to, send some alarm bells ringing, and people will start to, lay off people, readjust their earnings again for the first quarter and second quarter of 2024.
I've just been seeing, here in the chat, in the chat room here on our show, people are saying like, it's going to be a lean Christmas. Like they're not doing big Christmases this year. People are not going crazy and they're really pulling back. And I know that's just anecdotally here, people watching the show who have been saying that. But still, I think that's an indicator of where things are going. And then when you see the amount of things that you can buy for your dollar, when the value of your US dollar has now declined to such a degree where you go buy a value meal at McDonald's and it's now like $10, $10 to pick up the same thing that back in the 1980s, it was $4, $3 or whatever. So your dollar is going far less. It doesn't have as much traction as it once did under inflation.
Yeah, JP Morgan, right at the end of October came out and Jamie Dimon said, look, the wars in Ukraine, the wars in the Middle East have far-reaching impacts on energy, food markets, global trade, so on and so forth. True, we are spending so much money on this war when the money needs to be spent here in the United States on a lot of different things, in my opinion, but you're going to see higher food prices for longer. You're going to see interest rates higher for longer. If you're investing today, like you were as the interest rates were going from the high in the 80s down to, really on a real basis negative, but let's call it 0.5%, 1%, and you expect that your mortgage is going back to 3%, you can forget that. You have to start investing today and thinking today that I'm going to spend more money on food, I'm going to spend more money on energy, and I need to change the way that I'm investing from a low interest rate environment to at least an environment of 5% to 7% mortgages, somewhere in that range, because that actually is the long-term average. So we just regressed back to where we normally are, but everybody's in shock because of it. So you're getting the commercial real estate, and the WeWorks just went bankrupt, so it's probably going to cause a little bit more problems with the commercial real estate. People have to change the way they're thinking about their investing at this particular point with interest rates, because it's the biggest driver of returns in almost every segment of investing.
That's a great point. I was just speaking with a number of home builders, and had a deep discussion with them. And I was asking them how are interest rates been affecting, of course, the building process. They're still building, but of course now you're getting a lot of sort of baby boomers they're sitting on cash. They're able to come in and make purchases. Millennials, of course, are sitting back hoping that these interest rates are going to come back to a 3%. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. 2%, 2.5%. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. We're back to the 1990s when we had a housing boom and a rockin' economy, and interest rates were in the 7 range in the 1990s. So people forget that. And that was sort of a normal price range during a housing boom in the 1990s.
Yeah, if you look at interest rates on the long-term basis, you will see basically a 40-year up and a 40-year down cycle. So if you go all the way back to, the 50s, the roaring 50s, interest rates were fairly low. They pushed them down, so stocks are going to be high. The interest rates kind of work their way up, and you had the boom in the 80s, and interest rates went up to 15%. Well, you tack on another 40 years or so, and the interest rate's not exact 40 years, but that's about the cycle, and you're going to hit a bottom, and then they're going to start going the other way. So that's why I say you have to start looking at the history. If you want to, look at the history of interest rates and say, okay, what are the investments that are going to benefit from a slightly higher interest rate type of environment, and change your methods or at least your options that you're taking a look at for investing based on those interest rates. Everything, bonds, real estate, precious metals, everything is a present value of cash flows, or where that asset value is, all based on interest rates, and people have to adjust to that.
Yeah, you're out there in sunny Los Angeles, where I'm curious what the housing market looks like right now. And that are houses sitting in the medium range, kind of on the market for a long time, and how does that look? I mean, are you seeing a lot of movement there, and is there a lot of struggle in that market?
Residential real estate's definitely pulled back. I would say 15 to 20%. The commercial real estate is extremely ugly, and it seems to be getting a little bit more ugly. So residential's kind of holding up a little, much better in my opinion than the commercial side of the real estate. You brought up the builders. The builders not only have this interest rate problem, they have a supply problem with pricing. You know, I'm talking to these people. As you know, we have a lending company, Wilshire Finance Partners, and we lend to different builders and so on and so forth in the industry. These guys are just having problems with getting product that is at a reasonable price, right? I mean, a guy was on a lake and he just wanted to put another 4 feet of dock in, and it was $7,000 for the little floating dock pieces. He goes, you know, that was $3,000 2 years ago. Everything is just incredibly expensive for the builder. At the same time, interest rates are high, so it's just making it a lot more difficult to get to, to have builders build new projects, which we need. As you know, we need some more housing, and it's just harder and harder from a cost standpoint and an interest rate standpoint, which turns into a payment standpoint.
I want to talk about gold. Of course, this is your wheelhouse there at Lear Capital, and many of our viewers, I see them on a nightly basis talking about how they invest in gold, and a lot of them invest in silver as well. And so, but you're also seeing central banks. So central banks are also investing in gold, and they're buying up a lot of gold. We're seeing Russia, China, heck, the United States. A lot of countries right now are swallowing up gold because of what's coming. So there's a lot of like a grabbing of commodities. There's a grabbing of silver. There's a grabbing of gold. There's a grabbing of oil. There's a grabbing of actual tangible things right now. Can you explain why we're seeing these central banks swallowing up a lot of gold right now?
Yeah, so there's two main reasons for these purchases. Number one, if you print up $20 trillion like we have since 2008, the value of your dollar is going to become worth less and less and less over time, right? For every dollar out there, when you print another one, it's going to become worth less. The central banks understand this. They're experts at understanding it because they're the guys printing the money. So the last time they started purchasing this much gold was at the very end of the 60s and early into the 70s, right before inflation took off. That was the last time we saw the record amount of demand that we see from central banks today. Of course, you print up a bunch of money. Why don't we take this money and turn it into gold? Because that's going to go up. We'd rather have that on our balance sheet than a bunch of dollars or, treasuries that are going down in value as interest rates go up. So that's the big reason. The second reason is gold does very well when interest rates are high. If it didn't, then gold wouldn't have been $800 an ounce at the early 80s, at 1980, when inflation was high and interest rates were 15%. Well, gold started in 1974 at $50 an ounce and ran its way up to $850 an ounce. Two reasons. One, inflation. Two, big central bank buying through that whole period. So what are they doing again? Started last year with record amounts of buying, the largest we've seen in 50 years. So that would take us back to the late 60s, early 70s. And this year, they've exceeded that again. So you're right. China has been purchasing like crazy. I just got a report yesterday. The demand from China is 14%, has said 14% ahead of the same period last year. Biggest buyer in the world right now. They added 23 metric tons last month alone. That's a lot of gold. That's 740,000 ounces of gold. Clayton, when a central bank purchases gold, they're not day traders. They don't buy today and sell tomorrow. They buy today and they hold for 10, 15, 20 years at a time. If central banks are pulling that much gold out of the market, then you're going to have gold prices near the highs because you don't have enough gold to go around to the rest of the people. It's going to fluctuate. In my opinion, it'll fluctuate in the 1900s up to the 2000s, and it will have its breakout when there's just no physical gold to supply. So if we see this record demand end up in the last quarter of this year, first quarter of next year, you get a recession, that continues, then you get the individual investors coming in because they're trying to protect themselves. What happens to price when you have an increased demand on a fixed supply? It goes up. So that's why people are talking about $2,700 gold, $3,200 gold, possibly into 2024. So I believe gold's a great opportunity right now. Great hedge against higher interest rates, great hedge against inflation, and great hedge against the recession. We've already seen all of that happen with gold previously.
So $3,200 an ounce for gold. It's nearing $2,000 an ounce for gold. I know Bank of America has a $3,000 price target for gold. That's a huge jump, but $3,200 for an ounce of gold. And that's amazing.
The gold has a 92% predictability to where the our U.S. debt is. So if you took the U.S. debt throughout time, gold would be correlated to that debt amount by a probability of 92%. I would love to go to Las Vegas with 92% odds that I'm going to win, right? Because unless you believe the government's going to stop printing money, which is $1 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see. Matter of fact, it's $1.5 trillion to 1.7 trillion now that they're continually adding. Then you have a 92% probability that the precious metals are going to follow where that debt level is. Well, if you put the calculation on where the debt level exists today, then the gold price should already be $3,200 an ounce. So has this happened before? Sure. It should have been 2000 when it was 1100 back in 2010. Did it get there? Sure it did. It went right up to where it was supposed to be. So for every dollar that they add, does gold just tick up? Is it that predictable? No. So you look over a 3 to 5 year time period, the predictability is there with a fairly accurate track record. So the 3,200 is not just pulled out of the air here. We're looking at the debt around the world and in the United States and trying to calculate a number that's going to be, predictable for investors.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you just sent me this $3,200 gold report, which I found fascinating. So this number is not just pulled out of thin air; it's calculated on this debt number. I think you put it together. So can you make it available for our audience if they want to read this report as well?
Yeah, we'll make that report available. So $3,200 gold. We go through the whole history of gold, the history of the debt, some inflation and interest rates, so that people can get some sort of an idea what gold is, what happened to gold in some of the recession. So you got some sort of an idea if you believe that there's a potential recession coming, what gold could do there. So they can just give us a phone call at 800-613-3557, 800-613-3557, mention Redacted, and that will go out free of charge. So we normally charge for it. We're not going to charge. We'll get the report out free of charge along with our Gold Investors Guide, and everybody can get it for free. They can also go to learredacted.com and just fill out the information. If you don't want to call the number, it's easier for you to do that. learredacted.com, and we'll send it out free of charge.
All right, free. I like that. The gold won't be free. The gold is going to be $3,200 an ounce, I hope, as we are all big investors in gold and silver here on the show. And we hope that that's the case. So even if it's not, it's, right now, Natalie and I have, been purchasing a lot of gold and silver as a hedge against inflation right now, because we're seeing what's happening with the US dollar. We're seeing what's happening with the euro. So even if it's just a portion of your savings, trying to protect your family right now with some of these commodities, I can't recommend it highly enough. Kevin, great to see you. Thanks so much. We'll have links to what you mentioned in the description below. If anyone wants to grab that report, thank you for making that available for everyone. We appreciate it, Kevin. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
Unbelievable there. And of course, looking at what's going on with the debt and the amount of money being spent on the interest payments alone on the debt, how sustainable is this for the US dollar? But hey, the Fed, the Treasury Secretary say we're fine, nothing to see here, don't worry about it. Okay. So then fine. Put all of your money in U.S. dollars, and you can believe the politicians, or you can protect yourself. So let us know in the comments what you guys plan to do. And while you're there, by the way, our show is totally free. It is totally free. But one way you can support us is we have a store. We actually have a store, a Redacted store. And, we do not mark up these prices very much at all beyond what the cost to print our T-shirts, our hoodies, and our mugs. You can ask our whole team. The printing costs are right there, and we really don't make it very much on this at all, but it's a way to help support us a little bit here. And it's a great opportunity for, the Christmas season, right? If you want to get some hoodies, you want to get some mugs, you want to get some tumblers, some stickers, like this hoodie. Friends don't let friends watch the mainstream media. I love that hoodie. Or here's my favorite mug, I will not comply. We talked about that earlier in the show today. I will not comply with getting that digital ID. You can get the non-pacifist peace extremist flag. And friends don't let friends watch the mainstream media. You can put that right on your car. I would love, oh my God, I would love it to drive around and see redacted stickers on the back of people's
I'll
car.
honk at you though.
Oh, I'm going to get one of those. I'm putting that on the back of my car because we just made them. They're brand new.
Wouldn't it be so weird if we saw our own?
I would love that. See some.
And then you'd be like, why is this crazy lady honking at me? I feel like this.
You'd be like, hey, redacted. And we got to think of like a hand. What's a good hand gesture to do? Not the middle finger, but if you see another redacted viewer and they've got like a bumper sticker on there, there's millions of you that watch this show.
Like from Parent Trap.
Well, you may want to avoid using both hands for your hand signal in case you are driving. So do keep one hand on the wheel, please. We recommend.
We'll have to rethink that though.
She'll also have to rethink how she puts on her makeup then, because while she's driving.
I don't do that.
So yeah,
you won't see me in makeup out in the real world.
That's true. We got to think of a hand signal, hopefully not a middle finger, to a fellow redacted viewer. So we'll think about it. Maybe.
What's the sign language R? What's R?
I don't know. I don't know.
Like that?
Maybe
I
just
don't
peace.
know what it is, but I know that's not it.
R. I think it's like this.
Maybe just peace. Peace. Yeah. How about that? Peace. I like that.
Q-R-S-T-U-V.
I don't know. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's this one.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. That'd look a little weird.
I don't like that. It looks like Captain Hook.
Yeah, it's like, if someone's just doing that to me, I'd be like, what is that guy doing? It's like
I'm crushing your head.
Yeah,
I'm crushing your head.
I'm crushing your head.
You guys, we got to focus group this. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, we didn't really run this up the flagpole. I'm going with peace for now. Peace out.
Now everybody's going to be giving us weird signs. And like,
yeah, let us know with your emojis in the comments below.
We're going to get shot.
We'll do a poll. Maybe we'll do a poll next week on the show. Much love to all of you guys. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to the show, being a part of our community. We're back on Monday live at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We have content that'll go out over the weekend as well, interviews and such if you missed it. So please subscribe to the channel, turn on that bell notification, and we'll be back here on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Peace.
Mm-hmm.